Welcome to Bhisho, the provincial capital of the Eastern Cape. And if the Ministry of Justice has its way, the new seat of the Eastern Cape Division of the High Court.
I looked at pictures of Bhisho a couple of months ago and I could not see myself there. Not at all.
If the relocation were to take place, infrastructure has to be built basically from scratch.
Makanda, formerly known as Grahamstown, is one of the oldest cities in the province and historically the main seat of the Eastern Cape High Court. But now the city of Saints, with its population of 140,000, is facing a significant and rapid decline because of a bureaucratic decision.
It will completely decimate the economy of that town.
There's a lot of opposition to that move because it doesn't appear to be rational.
Our story looks at where the seat of the court may be moving to and the company that may be lucky enough to ultimately reap the benefits.
There's only about 11,000 permanent residents in Bhisho itself, most of which are government employees.
But an enterprise with a huge property portfolio is raking in hundreds of millions of rands in significant government contracts. And for some years, they've been building in Bhisho. So instead of improving access to justice, could the possible relocation inadvertently serve narrow business interests in Bhisho and lead to the death of Makanda?
If you look at the dates, 1867.
This is the Makanda High Court Library, an irreplaceable resource of case law spanning the last 160 years.
It's open to the public, to the Rhodes students, to the Rhodes Law Clinic. So, access to justice.
The court building still has solid yellowwood paneling and brass taps used for gas lamps in days gone by. But to address the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, a committee chaired by retired Deputy Chief Justice 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗶 recommended redrawing High Court jurisdictional boundaries in South Africa. When it came to the Eastern Cape, they dropped a bombshell.
The jurisdictional area of the Makhanda High Court would be drastically reduced to a mere 8%. That, of course, has a huge impact on the operations on this city.
Professor 𝗧𝗵𝗶𝘀 is Vice-Chancellor of Rhodes University. He's also Vice Chair of the Makanda High Court Action Committee.
It will just be a matter of time before that court has to shut down completely, because it will just become unviable.
The redrawn boundaries put 40% of the Eastern Cape's population under Bhisho's jurisdiction in this central corridor. The reasons given are geographic proximity and shorter traveling distance to court. Makanda will need far fewer judges, lawyers, and advocates. To gauge the ripple effect on the town, the Action Committee commissioned an economic impact study.
At the very least, some 9,405 jobs will be lost. That would be equivalent to about 500,000 jobs in Cape Town. Unemployment will soar, poverty will worsen, food security for tens of thousands will be in jeopardy.
They invited Justice Minister Ronald Lamola to a public meeting in the City Hall last year, where they presented their findings. But in a written response to Carte Blanche, the department claims the economic impact report cannot be relied on. That's a misinterpretation meant to discredit the report, says 𝗵𝗶𝘀.
With the greatest of respects, Minister has to accept that we commissioned a study because we didn't want to suck things out of our thumbs.
With an 87% reduction in the caseload, one of the jobs at risk is that of 𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗋𝗃, a legal secretary working for a local law firm.
Not only the legal secretaries, co-workers from the Master of the High Court, as well as the Director of Public Prosecutions, some of us will have to be retrenched because everyone can't move to Bhisho.
The lifeblood of Makanda revolves around three things:
excellent schools, Rhodes University and the Eastern Cape High Court. But now that there's a recommendation to move the seat of the court to Bhisho, people are asking, who would this move benefit?
Bhisho is an hour inland from East London. The High Court has 3 courtrooms. But in 2022, the Department of Public Works put out a tender to renovate and expand the court, adding 4 more courtrooms. The budget is over 200 million, but the tender hasn't been awarded yet.
The people who will benefit most are people who will be involved in the development of the infrastructure. And I fear that there may well be all manner of shenanigans.
Because obviously in any procurement arrangement, the risk of corruption is significant.
Professor Alex van den Heever is from the Wits School of Governance.
That shift in itself doesn't appear to make sense from a public value perspective, and yet it's being done.
But to host the seat of the court will take more than just a court building. It will require additional office space for more judges, advocates, attorneys, the Master's Office, the NPA, legal aid, the sheriff. And Bhisho is not so big on office space.
Which isn't to say they don't have big dreams. The vacant land next to the Bhisho High Court has been earmarked for the 1.9 billion rand Bhisho office precinct.
I've served on the Public Works Portfolio Committee for 10 years now. In every State of the Province address, we are promised that this term, it is going to be finished.
Dr. Vicky Knutzer is a member of the Eastern Cape Provincial Legislature.
Nothing has happened on the Bhisho office precinct for the last 10 years.
And how much money has been pumped into it?
65 million rand on consultants.
The Bhisho office precinct has taken more than a decade to get off the ground, or should we say, to break ground. The Department of Public Works is awaiting Treasury approval for this public-private partnership. The head of department is 𝗀𝗀𝗍𝗃 Manda.
We may have taken a decade, but we have never been this close as the Eastern Cape government.
Now, when we're talking about the millions that have already been spent on these professional quantity surveyors, architects and all of that, would you be willing to show us those drawings of what they've come up with?
Certainly we would.
But now they say they're not permitted to share the drawings with us. So you'll have to use your imagination.
That office precinct is meant for 7 head office departments. Once we complete ours, we will move our government departments to the state-owned.
But funnily enough, another Bhisho precinct was also conceptualized a decade ago by a private developer called 𝗀𝗍𝗍 Africa. And today, rising out of the center of Bhisho like a great colossus is what is now called the Independence Avenue Office Park. Eventually, it will measure 100,000 square meters and is already occupied by 4 government departments.
It would require an upfront investment at risk. They must have had some certainty that they were going to have government clients. Bhisho is not a private sector city, it's basically the government city. So I would be very interested in what the overall strategy was there and how they were certain they were going to get government clients.
𝗀𝗍𝗍 claim they weren't certain. They simply determined the market requirements before starting construction in 2015. As it turns out, 𝗀𝗍𝗍 has a long-standing relationship with government. Based in East London, the founder is property tycoon 𝗀𝗵𝗶𝘆. He's a reclusive figure who shies away from media attention.
He is director or is in some way connected to at least 63 companies in South Africa.
2021 parliamentary records show some of the companies held over 500 government leases throughout the country. 200 were with the South African police. But 𝗀𝗍𝗍 insists these records are wrong and they actually have well below 100 government leases. Naturally, we had to dig deeper. Waverley Office Park in East London houses multiple public entities, while the Trust Centre building is home to the Buffalo City municipality. But in 2022, the council gave 𝗀𝗍𝗍 a 50 million rand debt write-off from the 76 million owing for water, electricity, rates and taxes.
What incentive would that municipality have to gift 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔 this?
None. No normal incentive.
And yet it was done anyway.
Municipalities have to protect their revenue and their budgets and then their expenditure, and they have to prioritize greatest need. That seems very odd.
In a written response, the municipality said council took an executive decision based on 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔's COVID-19 relief motivation. We tried to interview 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔 about their 50 million rand debt write-off and their investment in Bhisho.
Initially, they said it's their company policy not to engage with media. Pretty odd for a company that does so much business with the government and gets so much of their income from public funds.
In a written response, 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔 states they had no prior knowledge about the possible move of the High Court seat to Bhisho. As for the debt write-off, they received no special treatment. They, like other companies, made an application in terms of the COVID-19 debt relief scheme available to all ratepayers. They pointed out that another property company also received substantial debt relief. 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔 claim they are merely a conduit for the collection of monies for services consumed by their tenants. Any debt relief ultimately benefited the tenants and not 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔. But on their application, they included almost every property they own in Buffalo City, even the offices of the municipality itself. Not to mention Mrs. du Plessis' guest house overlooking the Nahoon River.
But I think this would be a red flag. So, if I'm sitting in government and I see this at some public entity that this has happened, to me, the red flag is there and suggests very strongly investigate.
And that's already underway, says the municipality. Because back in Bhisho, 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔's government tenants, including the Office of the Premier, also benefited from the debt relief.
We are listening for OTP, we're listening for community safety, we're listening for social development, and recently I think we've listened for transport.
OTP stands for Office of the Premier, which already occupies an entire building next door to the new office park. The Premier is Oscar Mabuyane.
Doesn't the Premier already have offices?
The Premier has got offices.
So why are we leasing more?
Because of the need.
For how much?
The easiest way of divulging that kind of information would be to follow the PIA process.
How come you can't divulge how much? Because this is taxpayers' money.
This is taxpayers' money, but we can't divulge commercial information of the other party without consent of the other party.
The public needs to know how its money is being spent. These are not necessarily business secrets in many respects. The government has to account for what it's doing. It has to show that it is doing things in a proper way.
The Minister of Public Works revealed that 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔 received over 228 million rand in government rentals last year. Some of that was for the Office of the Premier. And it's here that an investigation that began in Makhanda comes full circle. Because if and when the government's office precinct is finally built, then 𝗀𝗪𝗍𝗔's office park will have plenty of space to offer the private sector should the seat of the High Court move to Bhisho.